Hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you today. When is the last time that you paused to marvel at the world? When is the last time that a large group of people, for example, an entire nation or community, paused to marvel at the universe? Many of us are going to have this opportunity in a few days on Saturday, October 14th, during a solar eclipse that will be visible in 8 states in the United States, and a partial solar eclipse will be visible in all 49 continental states, including Alaska. And then this eclipse will move on to Central and South America. There's going to be a second solar eclipse in April, on Monday, April 8th, 2024. This solar eclipse will, it's in 13 states, and it will also touch the southernmost part of Canada, including near Montreal and Toronto. And then in the contiguous US, we have to wait 20 more years for the next solar eclipse. So these are two very rare opportunities. And in 2044, that solar eclipse is going to be over Montana and North Dakota. So it's not everybody will be able to see that. This Saturday, October 14th in San Jose at 9:20 a.m., we will experience a solar eclipse of 75.8%. And we're having a special eclipse watch at Rosicrucian Park starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. The last solar eclipse the last one in the US was 7 years ago, and we celebrated that one at Rosicrucian Park too. We had a throng of people at Rosicrucian Park. I came kind of early, and there were so many people in front of the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. I thought, what is going on here? Because it was going to be in the Rosicrucian Labyrinth. And we learned that many of our neighbors wanted to be wanted to celebrate this solar eclipse with other people. So people just came from everywhere to be able to observe this really phenomenal event with other people. A solar eclipse takes place when the new moon passes directly between Earth and the sun. By an astronomical coincidence, the moon and the sun appear almost exactly the same size in Earth's sky, allowing the moon to completely cover the sun. Now, the moon is slowly moving away from Earth, so at some point it won't match exactly. It's just a coincidence that we look up and it's the exact same size and covers the sun, and all you see is that little ring around it. But eventually, as the moon gets farther away, it will cover less of the sun. But you and I don't have to worry about that. That's going to be quite a while from now. So when this happens, the sky will turn dark and the sun's hot but faint outer atmosphere, the corona, will shine like silver tendrils around the lunar disk. The oldest known recorded solar eclipse is believed to be inscribed on a megalithic structure in Ireland from 3,340 BCE. That's 5,300 years ago that they appear to have recorded that. Now, a recording of a solar eclipse that's certain is from 3,400 years ago in Babylonia, in what is today Syria. And this was recorded on May 3rd, 1375 BCE on Babylonian clay tablets. In China, in 1302 BCE, historians documented an epic total eclipse that blocked out the sun for 6 minutes and 25 seconds. Can you imagine this experience if you didn't know what was coming, if you weren't expecting this? But many astronomers did know what was happening, and they were able to predict eclipses, just like we do now. Records in China inscribed by the imperial astronomers include references to 938 solar eclipses from 771 BCE to 476 of our era. There are older records stating that 2 astronomers were beheaded because their predictions were wrong. You may be familiar with the zodiac of Dendera or Dendera in Egypt. And this refers to the solar eclipse that occurred in the year 51 BCE. It is represented by a circle containing the goddess Isis holding a baboon. And as you may know, the baboon represents the god Thoth, who is the god of wisdom. She's holding him by the tail. So this is not a zodiac, it's a sky map. The ancient people had interesting perspectives on solar eclipses. Many of them saw it as a disruption of the natural order. So it wasn't seen as a positive thing. It was a disruption of the established order. The word eclipse comes from the Greek word eclipsis, which means being abandoned. So doesn't sound very positive if you think the sun is abandoning you, especially if you viewed the sun as a deity and then it disappeared. Imagine every day the sun looks the same way and then something very different happens. For the ancient Egyptians, the deity Ra was very important. All forms of life were believed to have been created by Ra, who called each of them into existence by speaking their names. And you probably know that Ra is associated with the sun. In ancient Egypt, Aten is also associated with the sun. There was a school that worshipped the Aten, and the pharaoh, who later became known as Akhenaten, or pious toward the Aten, he studied in that school. He was raised in that tradition. And the people in this tradition didn't think the sun was the deity. They thought that the sun was the only symbol powerful enough to represent the unknowable deity that exists beyond all. And the life force came through that deity. In Greek mythology, Helios was a Titan, and he was the personification of the sun. He drove the chariot of the sun across the sky each day, and through the world ocean returned to the east at night. The Aztecs had 5 sun gods for various eras. The Aztecs were fascinated with the sun and carefully observed it, and had a solar calendar similar to that of the Maya. Their sun god was called Tonatiuh, and he represented the movement of the sun. He was the leader of heaven. For the Maya, there were hero twins, the sun and the moon, masculine and feminine. In ancient China, the sun was a symbol of the emperor, and an eclipse was seen as a warning to the leader, who would eat vegetarian meals and perform rituals to rescue the sun. There are some feminine solar deities too. The people of the ancient city of Ugarit in Syria venerated a solar goddess called Shapash, and that means she who sees everything. She may have expressed the idea of a deity that was made omniscient by her light. Ugarit is where that solar eclipse was recorded that I mentioned earlier in 1375. In myths, this goddess was often sent on errands by the goddess Anat, and at least once, her intervention allowed Baal to be saved. Also in Egypt, Hathor represented the radiance and energy of the solar orb. And Sekhmet was called the Eye of Ra. Remember, Ra is the sun god. And Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess who we've spoken about before, represented the unleashed energy of Ra. She was always associated with the desert and the hot desert sun. In Greece, Artemis was a sun goddess before she was supplanted by her brother Apollo. And then she was changed to the status of a lunar power. Apollo was brought in from Eastern traditions at a pretty late date and took over numerous sanctuaries that had been previously occupied by a goddess. For the Australian Aboriginal people, Gnawi, the solar goddess who searches daily for her lost son, has the sun is her torch in a dark world. So she's holding a torch looking for her son. In Hinduism, Indrani, the wife of the god Indra, was one of Vishnu's companions, and she represented the sun. In Buddhism, the goddess or bodhisattva associated with light and the sun was Marichi. For the ancient tradition in Japan, the Ainu, there was a goddess who was the day illuminating goddess, and her husband is the moon god. Among the Inuit, the sun is also a goddess. She is Sikanik, the sister of Takik, the moon god. So there are a number of couples of the male and the female, the sun and the moon. And again, imagine if you experienced the sun and the moon as deities, and then this energy was blocked or commingled. It's hard to imagine how you might feel. In Siddhi Yoga, an eclipse releases potent energy, and this is an important time to practice chanting and meditation, and the times of solar eclipses are considered auspicious times for initiating significant activities, but it is not a time to travel. According to Siddha Yoga, it's a time to refrain from travel. So how did the ancient people forecast solar eclipses? It's easier to observe and forecast a lunar eclipse because the diameter of Earth's shadow on the moon is 7,456 miles. It's huge, and we're looking at the moon. For a solar eclipse, the moon's shadow on Earth is only 186 miles wide. So it presents less opportunity to observe, and it's more challenging to forecast. It's only after the lunar orbit was observationally determined. It wasn't until the lunar orbit was figured out and the changing speed of the moon and the Earth in their orbits were established that people could predict total eclipses reliably. And they could do this within the nearest month or less. So it's astonishing to think that ancient people had that level of knowledge and skill and expertise and whatever else that took. This level of astronomical sophistication was apparently reached by ancient Greek philosophers and astronomers around the 1st century BCE. So they could predict solar eclipses in the 1st century BCE. So we can only speculate on what kind of wisdom was lost, for example, when the library at Alexandria was burned, or when the Spanish conquistadors and missionaries in ancient Mexico and Peru and Chile burned the records there, because those people also had incredible knowledge about astronomy, or lost in Babylonia or Mesopotamia or China. All of these traditions, all of these people possessed exceptional astronomical knowledge. In the year 1605, the astronomer Johannes Kepler, who was a part of Rudolf II's Rosicrucian magical circle in Prague, gave a scientific description of a total solar eclipse. And this was probably the first one. So Rudolf II was the Holy Roman Emperor, and he was the king of Bavaria. He was this powerful ruler, and he gathered around him in Prague mystics who explored the mysteries, and Johannes Kepler was one of these. 200 years later, a solar eclipse was responsible for the discovery of helium. The first evidence for the existence of helium was discovered by the French astronomer Jules Janssen, although he's French, so I'm sure he says that differently, during a total solar eclipse in 1868. Because of this, it's named after the Greek word for the sun, which is helios. So this is how helium was discovered and how it got its name. Helium is the second lightest and the second most abundant element known to humans. During an epic eclipse in 1919, which lasted almost 7 minutes, scientists measured the bending of light from the stars as they passed near the sun. The findings confirmed Einstein's theory of general relativity, which describes gravity as a warping of space-time. So it's very simple to predict a total eclipse of the sun. First, there is a new moon, so you can't see the moon. Second, Earth, the moon, and the sun are aligned in a straight line. Next, the moon is near perigee, and this is when the moon is closest to Earth, which when it's closest is about 225,623 miles. So when the moon is closest to Earth. When the moon is near a lunar node, and these are 2 points calculated in space that lie between the ecliptic of the sun and the orbit of the moon. So that's it. You just need to know all that. And of course, it helps to have a computer. But even with all that and a computer, I'm still deeply impressed with the brilliant people who are able to predict and forecast solar eclipses. National Geographic studies how animals respond to total solar eclipses. They've reported that often animals are very loud just before the eclipse and then completely silent during it. There are some exceptions, though. Giraffes were reported to run about during the eclipse and to quietly go back to grazing the trees when it was over. Raptors stopped flying. Some spiders destroyed their webs. National Geographic and NASA have asked that we all become citizen scientists or community scientists. And I know some of you are already community scientists. This is when just regular people participate in scientific research. And this started in the 1990s when researchers needed many more other research people than they could afford to hire. So they put a call out to people in a community to observe certain events or to look for a certain insect in their backyard or other projects like that. It involves a large group of the public in science. And by the way, if you discover a species, you get to name it. Some of the NASA projects that involve citizen scientists or community scientists are they report fireballs in the sky. They collect data about clouds. They make environmental observations that complement satellite observations. And as a community scientist, you can look through the satellite images to help discover what's there. So NASA, for the solar eclipse on Saturday, is asking community scientists to report their observations. And they have a special project, but unfortunately, we're too late now for it because you have to receive a free audio recording machine, but they'll be doing this again for the April solar eclipse. So keep that in mind. You can't order it for that yet, but you can report your observations on how animals respond, changes in temperature. You can take photos of the eclipse. NASA's Eclipse Soundscapes project observes, the community scientists observe an eclipse with all of their senses, and then they submit their observations to the Eclipse Soundscapes website. And again, you can receive a little device where you record what's going on in your environment, and then you submit that to NASA for their research. And of course, just a reminder, when you're observing a solar eclipse, it is essential, not optional, to wear some kind of eye protection. And there are many ways that you can do this yourself, where you just go online and you can search this, where you create a pinhole and you can observe the shadow of the eclipse and watch it happen. Say if you have that pinhole, you can watch it on the ground or hold a piece of paper up. Or what's best is to have solar eclipse glasses, which when you look through those, if you're not looking at the sun, they look completely black. But when you look at the sun, it completely protects your eyes and you can watch the eclipse occur. So the October 14th, 2023 eclipse will cross North, Central, and South America. And again, it will be visible in parts of the United States, Mexico, and many countries in South and Central America. It begins in Oregon at 9:13 a.m. Pacific time, and it ends in Texas at 12:03 p.m. Central time. And then Texas, you get another shot with the solar eclipse next April. And as I mentioned earlier, in San Jose, in October, the solar eclipse will be at 75.8%. We won't see as much of the solar eclipse in April. The Rosicrucian teachings present a lot of information about the sun and the moon. In the Rosicrucian Code of Life, we're encouraged to greet the sun every morning. We do a sun meditation, we take 7 deep breaths, we raise our arms and take full breaths as we're also encouraged to intone the vowel sound ra, and to give another day and to give thanks for another day of conscious awareness. And as I mentioned earlier, in the school of Akhenaten that worshipped the Aten, they saw the sun as a symbol for the unknowable deity. And in the Rosicrucian teachings, it states that the sun radiates a life-giving cosmic essence to us on Earth, to all living beings. Well, just radiates it, and living beings benefit from it. It radiates this from someplace beyond the sun, but it's radiated to us through the power of the sun. And when we breathe air, it has oxygen, and it also has this other essence that Rosicrucians call cosmic essence. And you've probably heard of it in other traditions too. It's also called prana or chi. There is a special set of Rosicrucian monographs in an upper degree where we learn about the influence of an astral body on a particular day of the week. And there's one for the sun and one for the moon. This isn't just specific to the Rosicrucian teachings, it's revealed through the name of the days of the week. Sunday is the day of the sun. The sun acts directly on the psychic consciousness of all our cells and maintains harmony among them. So again, we have this cosmic essence radiated toward us through the sun. And the sun acts directly on the psychic consciousness of all our cells and maintains harmony among them. The influence of the sun, again, in these exercises, it mentions 7 days of the week, and each day an astral body exerts a specific influence on us. And for the sun, it involves generosity. And it's not by chance that in a number of works of esoteric astrology, the sun is given the title of generous star. For those of you who are Martinists, this idea may be familiar to you. There's a statement that says the sun refuses no one its astral influence, and every creating being receives a ray of its divine substance. That's pure generosity. The sun generously shares its life-giving essence. In Martinism, the sun is also the intermediary between the macrocosm and the microcosm, and also between the visible and invisible. For initiates, the sun has always represented divine fire, divine light, and by extension, enlightenment. Now for the moon. You've probably figured out the day that the moon has the most influence on us is Monday. And this is especially revealed in other languages where Monday is lundi or lunes, which means moon in those languages. The moon influences our intuition. Since it does not radiate its own light, but reflects that of the sun, mystics have always thought that the moon represents hidden knowledge. In other words, esoteric knowledge. Its aspect is changeable according to whether it is waxing or waning, whether it's becoming a full moon or going the other direction. Consequently, it also symbolizes the process of inner evolution and, by extension, that of initiation. The moon has a feminine energy and has the characteristic of influencing fertility. You're probably already aware that one of the most powerful influences of the moon is on the tides, due to the moon's power of attraction, and they vary depending on lunar phases. The moon accounts for low and high tides. People are sensitive to this because anywhere between, well, depending on which part of our body, the blood or more solid parts, 75% of the human body is water, and blood is much more than that. Blood is 90% water. So just as the moon exercises a stimulating effect on the tides, it does the same on the blood and the lymph, especially during its waxing phase, when it's growing bigger. In Martinism, the moon symbolizes the world of imagination and dreams. Generally, in human beings, it relates to the principles of receptivity and passivity. So now we're going to practice meditation related to the sun and the moon. Going to share my screen here. So this is an image of the sun. And you can either look at this image or close your eyes and have this image of the sun in your mind, as you harmonize with the influence of the sun on your being, now as you attune with the energy of the sun, in your mind's eye, see the word generosity. You could see your hand writing it on a whiteboard or a blackboard. Generosity. Feel the generosity of the sun that refuses its astral influence to no one and generously shares its life-giving cosmic essence. Now just release that thought and be open to any impressions you may receive. Now we're going to focus on the moon. And again, you can look at this image of the moon, or you can have your eyes closed and have it in your mind's eye and feel the influence of intuition on your being. The moon's influence of intuition. In your mind's eye, write out the word intuition as though you're writing on a whiteboard or a blackboard. Intuition. And release this image. Just open yourself to any impressions you may receive. Now the image on the screen shows the beginning of a solar eclipse with the moon just beginning to block our view of the sun. So consider the merging of these influences, intuition and generosity, the powerful Ra, the receptive moon, the masculine, the feminine. And now we see the total eclipse of the sun. From our perspective, the moon and the sun merged. Brothers and sorors, I hope you have an opportunity to participate in such an amazing event, to witness a solar eclipse, or we often have lunar eclipses as well, that remind us the marvels of the universe. It's a great opportunity to just stop and think about this incredible world in which we live, the energies that influence us. Thank you so much.